has been rocked by various scandals, including the alleged payment of unauthorized bonuses to top executives. Now, in studio to unpack the story for us is Ettiene Retief. He's the chairperson of the National Tax Committee, and he's from the South African Institute of Professional Accountants. Thanks very much, Ettiene, for coming into studio.
Pleasure.
So it's being hailed as this much-awaited, much-needed public inquiry. Tell us why it is so much needed.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of mudslinging that takes place, and the faith in the institution has been waning. Tax morality goes hand in hand with it. And if we're wanting to recover, we want to fix SARS as a dominant institution of collecting taxes, we have to address these issues. It goes a long way in rebuilding trust that the public has in that institution. And I think also it gives clarity of the issues that have unfolded over the last few years. And instead of it being something you read in a book or it's just a news article, there's some clarity as to exactly what happened. And I think it kind of helps to close that chapter.
Now, aside from rebuilding trust, which is, of course, incredibly important, what we're also hoping to see is to get more money into the country's coffers. I mean, that's what we're all hoping for.
Well, I think the most important thing to get from this is that they're wanting to look at period prior and period current and saying, well, what has happened in between? Because there's a lot of things that have changed. For instance, the change in the large business centre that was a fundamental structure that was put in by the then Commissioner Pravin Gordhan and yielded a very good result. With the structural changes and how they changed, there obviously are impacts. So for one of the items in the terms of reference that this commission has is to say, well, those structural changes, what impact has it had? So it gives us clarity as to how well LBC actually worked and whether or not we need to go back that model or not. So it helps to make informed decisions in how to go back to our meeting our revenue collection targets.
And just on a sort of practical level, this mass exodus of people we've seen leaving SARS, it just means we have so much less people to do what is really a massive job.
Yeah. Look, most of those jobs have been filled. I think the big loss there is a lot of those people were with SARS for 10, 15, some of them in excess of 20 years.
And that comes with institutional knowledge, of course.
Correct.
Yeah.
And many of the people who have left were also part of the development of those structures, of systems. So there is a lot of knowledge that goes with it. And I think in any organization, not just SARS, I think any company, an indicator of staff turnaround or high staff turnaround is an indicator of there's potentially a problem.
Now, this the 2 consecutive years that we've seen in terms of revenue shortfall.
Yes.
Do you reckon that these hearings might go some way to changing that situation around?
Look, those periods have come and gone. The revenue collections are what they are. I think what we're looking for is to understand why. Yeah. Revenue collection, and just to unpack it a little bit, is there's a number of factors that come into it. On the one side, there's the economic factor, so how much tax is there to be collected, and the other side, it's the collection of those taxes. So I think what we are hoping to see from this is to understand to what extent SARS and its collection and its mechanisms of collection, how much it played a part in the revenue shortfalls, so that we can identify to what extent it was economic factors and what extent it was institutional factors. By understanding the problem, you can then fix it. And I think that will go a long way in the current and future years of dealing with problems of revenue collection at an institutional level.
Now, it's called public hearings that are kicking off in Pretoria today, but how can members of the public be involved in these hearings?
Well, I think what to try to do is to try to make sure this is an open forum where you're not just asking isolated parties for information and you're not getting the full picture. So there was an invitation for people to make submissions. There's still even further invitation on parties to address, for instance, terms of reference or changes to terms of reference. And I think in terms of this, and we've seen this in many of these kind of inquiries, when you're doing it in a public forum, you're allowing for these issues to have more clarity, or to have more, that transparency comes with more faith in the process. because it's not just behind closed doors, and you again saying is, well, there was an agenda driven by this. It gives opportunity for us to hear what actually is unfolded there, and not just wait for an end result report.
Now, former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan set to kick off those hearings at 2 o'clock, where he will be testifying, so to speak. Who are some of the people you're hoping to hear from?
Well, I think probably one of the most important people to start off with would be Pravin Gordhan, because a lot of the institutional structures like LBC and that was done under his commission, and in fact he was a party who told the then Commissioner Tomayani not to make those changes. There obviously has been this rivalry between them, and I think the background that he could provide as to what those structures were will set the foundation for understanding how the changes impacted revenue collection. So I think as a starting point, there is where we have to start. After that, I mean, we've heard from various parties directly or indirectly through media, books and those of things, and I think here will be a number of parties that have been named in there who felt that they have not been afforded the opportunity to address their side of the story. I'd be wanting to hear what they've got to say.
So we might see some explosive testimony if we just think about Jacques Pauw's book, The President's Keepers. All right, well, thanks very much for coming in, Ettiene Retief. It's great to have you in studio. He's the chairperson of the National Tax Committee and also from the South African Institute of Professional Accountants. As those SARS hearings kick off today, they're set to begin around 2 o'clock this afternoon, and we'll bring you further updates, of course, throughout the day.